The child stood at the edge of my sleep pod, her silver eyes reflecting the dim emergency lighting that pulsed through the quarantine bay. I woke to find her there, motionless, her slender fingers pressed against the transparent barrier separating human from Valkyrie. She didn't flinch when my eyes opened. She simply watched, tilted her head, and whispered something in her language that made the translator chip in my skull stutter and fail. I was the only human on this ship. The only survivor of the colony raid that had torn through Epsilon's station like a blade through silk. They'd found me in the wreckage, half dead, clutching a data core that supposedly contained critical intelligence. The Valkyrie Dominion didn't take prisoners. They took assets. I was being transported to their core worlds for interrogation, locked in this medical cell, monitored every second. No one was supposed to be here. Especially not a child. She pressed her palm flat against the barrier. Her skin was pale blue, threaded with luminescent veins that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. She couldn't have been more than 7 cycles old by their measure. Young enough that her cranial ridges hadn't fully hardened, still smoothed along her temples. "You're different," she said in perfect, unaccented English. The translator chip kicked back online with a sharp pain behind my left eye. I sat up slowly, keeping my hands visible. The Valkyrie responded poorly to sudden movements, even from captives locked behind reinforced barriers. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I know." She didn't move. "But you were dreaming. I heard you." That was impossible. The pod was soundproofed, monitored, isolated. Even if I'd been screaming, which I didn't think I had been, no sound should have escaped. "Heard me how?" She touched her forehead, right where her cranial ridge would eventually form. "Here. You were calling for someone. Sarah. You were saying you were sorry." My blood went cold. Sarah had been my partner on Epsilon's station. She died in my arms when the Valkyrie breaching charges turned the habitat ring into vacuum. I'd held her until her lips turned blue and the light left her eyes. I hadn't spoken her name since. "How do you know that name?" The child's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her silver eyes. Curiosity. Wonder. "I don't just hear words. I hear the things beneath them. The feelings that make them real." Footsteps echoed in the corridor beyond. Heavy, measured, purposeful. The kind of footsteps that belong to authority. The child's head snapped toward the sound. For the first time, I saw fear cross her face. "You need to leave," I said quickly. "Right now. They'll punish me if they find me here." "Then go." She looked back at me, and in that moment something passed between us. Understanding, maybe? Or recognition. She was as trapped on this ship as I was, just in a different way. "Why do humans fight so hard?" she asked. "Even when they know they'll lose?" The footsteps were getting closer. Multiple sets now. At least 3 guards, moving with the synchronized precision of a security sweep. "Because losing doesn't mean we were wrong to try." She considered this for a long moment. Then, she reached into the satchel at her side and pulled out something small and metallic. She pressed it against the barrier, and a section of the supposedly impenetrable wall shimmered and became permeable. She pushed the object through before the field could re-establish. It was a data chip. Valkyrie Military Standard. "This has the real reason they destroyed your station," she said. "The reason they're taking you to the throne world. It wasn't about territory or resources." The footsteps stopped just outside the bay door. "Then, what was it about?" The door began to open with a hydraulic hiss. "They're afraid of you. All of you. Because you do something we were bred out of generations ago." "What?" The door opened fully. 3 royal guards stepped through, their armor polished to a mirror sheen, weapons holstered but hands resting on them casually. They saw the child immediately. Their posture shifted, became rigid with barely controlled tension. The child's voice was barely a whisper, but I heard every word clearly. "You hope." The lead guard, taller than the others with a commander's insignia etched into her shoulder plate, stepped forward slowly. Her eyes moved from the child to me, then back to the child. She didn't draw her weapon. She didn't need to. The threat was implicit in every controlled movement. "Daughter," the commander said quietly, "step away from the containment field." The child didn't move. She kept her eyes locked on mine. "Mother, I have a question." The commander's expression didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten slightly on her weapon. The other two guards spread out, flanking positions, cutting off any potential escape route. Professional. Disciplined. Prepared for violence but not eager for it. "This is not the place for questions," the commander said. "When is?" the child asked. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the ship's engines seemed to fade. This was a challenge, spoken in the quiet voice of a child, but carrying weight far beyond her years. The commander's hand fell away from her weapon. She took 3 measured steps forward, until she stood directly beside her daughter. She looked down at the child for a long moment, then, slowly, deliberately, she looked at me. "What did you say to her?" The question was directed at me, but it wasn't hostile. It was careful. Probing. "She asked why humans fight when we know we'll lose." "And your answer?" "That losing doesn't mean we were wrong to try." The commander's eyes narrowed slightly. She crouched down, bringing herself level with her daughter. When she spoke again, her voice had softened, but only marginally. "What is your question, Sarah?" The child, Sarah, looked at her mother. Then she looked at me. Then back to her mother. "If hope is dangerous," Sarah said slowly, "why does feeling it make me less afraid?" The commander froze. The other two guards exchanged glances. The air in the quarantine bay became thick with tension so profound I could taste it. This was the moment. The question that would change everything. I could see it in the way the commander's carefully controlled expression finally cracked, just for a fraction of a second. I could see it in the way the guards' hands moved away from their weapons entirely, as if violence had suddenly become irrelevant. The commander stood slowly. She looked at me for a long time, her silver eyes searching for something I wasn't sure I could provide. Then she reached down and took her daughter's hand. "Come with me," she said quietly. "Both of you." She turned to the guards. "Deactivate the containment field. The human is no longer a prisoner." One of the guards stepped forward, uncertainty written across his features. "Commander, our orders are about to change," the commander interrupted. Her voice carried absolute authority now. "Because my daughter just asked a question I cannot answer alone. And if I cannot answer it, then perhaps the Dominion cannot either." She looked back at me as the barrier began to shimmer and fade. "The throne world awaits. But not for your interrogation." She paused. "For your testimony." The barrier dissolved completely. For the first time in 3 weeks, nothing stood between me and the Valkyrie commander who had likely given the order to destroy everything I'd ever known. Sarah smiled. It was small, tentative, but genuine. "What's hope feel like for you?" she asked. I stepped forward, through the space where the barrier had been, into the unknown. "Like this," I said. The commander's grip tightened on her daughter's hand. Then, she turned and began walking toward the door. Sarah walked beside her, and, after a moment's hesitation, I followed. The other guards fell in behind us, their weapons still holstered, their formation protective rather than threatening. We walked through corridors of burnished metal and pulsing light, past dozens of crew members who stopped and stared with expressions I couldn't quite read. Shock. Confusion. Something else beneath it all. Something that might have been curiosity, or fear, or perhaps the very thing Sarah had asked about. Hope took many forms. Sometimes it was a defiant gesture in the face of certain death. Sometimes it was a child's question that unraveled centuries of conditioning. Sometimes it was a commander choosing to risk everything because her daughter had shown her something she'd forgotten existed. We descended deeper into the ship, toward the command center, toward the communication arrays that would connect us to the throne world and the queen who ruled over billions. Sarah looked back at me once. Her silver eyes were bright with questions she hadn't yet learned to ask. I smiled at her. She smiled back. The commander noticed the exchange but said nothing. Her face remained impassive, carved from stone and duty. But her hand never let go of her daughter's. The command center doors opened before us with a whisper of pressurized air. Inside, holographic displays showed star systems and fleet positions, tactical data streaming across surfaces that seemed to float in midair. Officers turned as we entered, their expressions moving rapidly from confusion to alarm. The commander ignored them all. She walked directly to the central communication terminal and placed her palm against the authentication scanner. "Open a priority channel to the throne world," she ordered. "Direct to the Queen's personal chamber. Authorization code Velthra Nix, commander of the Third Fleet, blood sworn to the Silver Throne." The communications officer hesitated for only a moment before complying. The holographic displays reconfigured, merging into a single massive projection field. The weight felt eternal. Sarah stood between her mother and me, her hands still clasped in her mother's grip, her eyes wide as she watched the display. Then the field flared brilliant white, and a face appeared. The Queen was ancient by any measure. Her cranial ridges were fully formed, sweeping back from her forehead in elaborate patterns that denoted centuries of life. Her silver eyes held the weight of 1,000 worlds, and when she spoke, her voice resonated with power that made the deck plates vibrate. "Commander Velthra, you contact me directly. This is unprecedented. Your Majesty." Velthra bowed her head. "I contact you because I have encountered something unprecedented." The Queen's gaze moved past Velthra, found me, and stopped. For a long moment she simply stared. Then, her attention shifted to Sarah. "You have the human prisoner out of containment. Standing in your command center. With your daughter present." The Queen's voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Explain." Velthra straightened. "My daughter asked me a question, Your Majesty. One I could not answer." "What question could possibly justify this breach of protocol?" Velthra looked down at Sarah, then back to the Queen. "She asked me why feeling hope makes her less afraid." The silence that followed was absolute. Every officer in the command center had stopped working. Every eye was fixed on the holographic projection of their Queen. The Queen's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Something I couldn't name. "Hope," she said slowly, "is a human weakness. It blinds them to reality. It makes them fight battles they cannot win. It is why they suffer." "Then why?" Sarah said suddenly, her young voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "Does he smile when he talks about it?" The Queen's gaze snapped to Sarah. The child didn't flinch. She stared up at the massive holographic projection with the fearless curiosity of youth not yet beaten down by the weight of empire. "You dare address me directly, child? You're the Queen," Sarah said simply. "If you don't know the answer, who does?" Velthra's eyes closed briefly. The other officers looked like they'd stopped breathing. I waited for the explosion, the punishment, the reassertion of absolute authority. Instead, the Queen leaned forward slightly. Her ancient eyes studied Sarah with an intensity that made the child seem suddenly very small and very vulnerable. "Come here," the Queen said softly. Sarah looked up at her mother. Velthra's jaw was tight, her expression unreadable. But after a moment she nodded. Sarah stepped forward, closer to the holographic projection. The light from it cast her features in sharp relief, making her seem almost ethereal. "Tell me, child. What else did the humans say to you?" Sarah glanced back at me. I gave her a small nod. "He said losing doesn't mean you were wrong to try." The Queen was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, but it filled the entire command center. 473 years ago, I stood where you stand now. I was young, barely past my ascension trials. And I asked my mother, the Queen before me, a similar question. She paused. She had no answer. So she did what queens do. She silenced the question with duty, with purpose, with the weight of empire. The Queen's eyes moved to Velthora. I have ruled for centuries. I have conquered worlds. I have built an empire that spans a quarter of the galaxy. And in all that time, I have never once allowed myself to ask that question again. She looked back at Sarah. Until now. The Queen straightened in her throne. Commander Velthora, you will escort the human to the throne world as planned. But he will not be interrogated. He will not be imprisoned. She paused. He will be heard. By me. Personally. And your daughter will be present. Your Majesty. One of the officers began, but the Queen silenced him with a single look. This human carries something we eliminated from ourselves in pursuit of efficiency and order. Something we deemed weakness. The Queen's voice grew stronger. But if it is weakness, why have we failed to fully break them? Why do they fight on, generation after generation, against impossible odds? Why do they smile in the face of extinction? She looked directly at me for the first time since the conversation began. You will answer these questions. Not under interrogation. Not under coercion. You will answer them because a child asked something I spent centuries avoiding. And because somehow, impossibly, hope still exists in a universe we thought we'd stripped it from. The holographic projection began to fade. Travel swiftly, Commander. The throne world awaits. And so do questions 4 centuries overdue. The projection vanished. The command center remained utterly silent. Velthora looked at me. Her expression was complicated, layered with emotions I couldn't fully parse. Respect, maybe? Uncertainty. Fear. It seems, she said quietly, that my daughter has changed the course of history with a single question. Children often do, I replied. When adults remember to listen. Sarah smiled up at me. Will you tell me more about hope? On the way to the throne world? I crouched down, bringing myself level with her. I'll tell you everything I know. But I think you already understand it better than most. How? Because you asked the question despite knowing it might get you in trouble. That's hope. The belief that asking matters more than staying silent. Velthora placed her hand on her daughter's shoulder. The journey to the throne world takes 3 weeks at maximum speed. You will have quarters assigned. Proper quarters, not containment. You will have access to our libraries, our histories. She paused. And you will teach my daughter about this hope you carry. What do I get in return? The chance to change minds that have been closed for centuries. The opportunity to save your species from eradication. Her silver eyes met mine. And perhaps, if you're convincing enough, the chance to learn why we fear you so much that we would rather destroy you than understand you. I stood slowly. That's all I've wanted since Epsilon Station burned. A chance to be heard. Then you have it. Velthora turned to her crew. Set course for the throne world. Maximum speed. Priority clearance through all checkpoints. Authorization Velthora Nix, by order of the Queen herself. The crew moved with renewed purpose. Stations lit up. Engines thrummed with increased power. I felt the subtle shift in gravity as the ship began to accelerate. Sarah tugged on my hand. Can we start now? Can you tell me about Sarah? The person you were dreaming about? The pain of memory hit like a physical blow. But looking into Sarah's curious, fearless eyes, I found something I hadn't expected. The strength to begin. Yes, I said. I can tell you about Sarah. And about all the others who died believing their sacrifice meant something. Who fought because they had to, not because they thought they could win. That sounds sad. It was. But it was also beautiful. Because they chose to fight anyway. Velthora led us out of the command center, down corridors that felt less like a prisoned ship and more like something I couldn't quite name. The crew we passed no longer looked at me with hostility or calculation. They looked curious. Uncertain. Some even nodded slightly as we passed, gestures of acknowledgement that seemed to cost them effort. We reached a section of the ship that was clearly residential. Velthora stopped at a door that opened at her touch. These are guest quarters. normally reserved for diplomatic visitors. She gestured inside. They're yours for the journey. The room beyond was simple but comfortable. A bed, a desk, a viewport showing the stars streaming past as we traveled faster than light. It was more humanity than I'd experienced in weeks. Thank you, I said. Velthora nodded. Sarah will visit you daily for lessons. I will join when my duties permit. And, Commander. She paused, searching for words. What you said to my daughter about losing and trying. I want you to know that resonated beyond just her. I heard it too. Did it change anything for you? She looked at Sarah, then back at me. I don't know yet. But I think it might. And that terrifies me more than any weapon your species has ever created. She turned to leave, then stopped. The data chip Sarah gave you. Have you examined it yet? I pulled it from my pocket. Not yet. Do so. Soon. It contains information that will help you understand what you're walking into. What the Queen meant when she said we fear you. Velthora's expression was grave. We fear you because you remind us of what we were before we became efficient. Before we became perfect. Before we forgot how to be anything except what we were designed to be. And what's that? Tools of empire. Nothing more. Nothing less. She looked at her daughter with something that might have been longing. Until a child asks a question and remembers we used to be something else. Velthora left. Sarah remained, standing in the doorway, looking at me with those impossibly bright silver eyes. Mother never talks like that, she said quietly. I've never seen her uncertain before. Uncertainty isn't weakness. It's the beginning of wisdom. Is that hope too? It's part of it. Hope is trusting that questions have answers worth finding, even when the questions are scary. Sarah stepped fully into the room. Will you really tell me about Sarah? I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling the weight of exhaustion and memory pressing down. But I nodded. I'll tell you everything. But first I need to know something. Why did you come to my cell? How did you even know I was there? Sarah looked down at her hands. I told you. I heard you dreaming. Heard the feelings beneath the words. It's something I can do that others can't. Mother says it's because my neural pathways form differently. That I'm defective. You're not defective. You're empathic. Humans have that too. Her eyes widened. Really? Really. Some more than others. It's considered a gift, not a flaw. A gift. She tested the word, rolling it around like something precious. Mother will want to know about this. If humans value it, maybe the Dominion was wrong to breed it out. Maybe. But changing minds takes time. How much time? Sometimes generations. Sometimes a single moment. It depends on whether people are ready to hear what they need to learn. Sarah moved to the viewport and stared out at the stars. I used to think the universe was simple. That the Dominion was right and everyone else was wrong. That the Queen knew everything and never made mistakes. What do you think now? That maybe the universe is full of questions nobody's answered yet. And maybe that's okay. Maybe that's even better than having all the answers. I smiled despite everything. Despite the grief and the fear and the impossible situation I'd found myself in. Because this child, this small, defective, beautiful child, understood something profound. That, I said, is exactly what hope feels like. She turned back to me, and in that moment I saw the future. Not clearly. Not with any certainty. But I saw possibility. I saw the chance that this wouldn't end in fire and extinction. That maybe, somehow, a child's question could ripple outward and change the course of empires. It was fragile. It was unlikely. It was the smallest spark in an ocean of darkness. But it was there. And that was enough to keep fighting for. Tell me about Sarah, Sarah said, sitting cross-legged on the floor. Tell me why remembering her hurts but also makes you smile. So I did. I told her about Sarah's laugh, about her terrible jokes, about the way she'd believed so fiercely in humanity's future that she'd volunteered for the most dangerous posting in the outer colonies. I told her about love and loss and the strange alchemy that turns grief into purpose. Sarah listened to every word, her silver eyes never leaving my face, absorbing not just the story but the emotions beneath it. Learning what it meant to hope, to hurt, to keep going anyway. Outside the viewport, the stars streamed past. We raced toward the throne world, toward the Queen and the questions that waited there. Toward a future uncertain and terrifying and full of impossible possibility. 3 weeks to change the mind of an empire. 3 weeks to prove that hope wasn't weakness but strength. 3 weeks to honor Sarah's memory by doing exactly what she would have done. Keep fighting. Keep believing. Keep hoping. Even when the odds were impossible. Especially then. Because that's what humans do. And maybe, just maybe, it was what the Valkyrie needed to remember how to do too. Sarah fell asleep eventually, curled up on the floor, her face peaceful. I covered her with a blanket from the bed and finally examined the data chip she'd given me. What I found there changed everything. But that revelation would have to wait. For now, I let the child sleep, let myself rest, and let hope carry us toward whatever came next. It would be enough. It had to be.